I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Queen Camilla expected another formal palace meeting. Instead, she was handed a decision that stripped away one of the most symbolic powers attached to her royal position. The Privy Council had revoked her historic command authority over the royal guards, effective immediately. For several seconds, Camilla said nothing. King Charles watched her expression change, and before anyone could soften the blow, one brutal detail became clear. This was not a temporary restriction. It was a permanent transfer of control. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla lowered her eyes to the final page again, as though reading it twice might somehow change the words. The Privy Council, the formal body of senior advisors who support the sovereign in major constitutional decisions, had gathered with an unusual seriousness that morning. Charles sat only a short distance away. Prince William remained controlled across the table, while senior royal advisors and officials connected to ceremonial military appointments waited in silence. This mattered because the royal guards were not merely uniformed figures attached to palace ceremony. Their duties represented the visible link between the crown, military tradition, and the authority of the sovereign. The Queen reached the clause that made the decision impossible to misunderstand. Her ceremonial command authority over the royal guards was revoked immediately, and future supervisory responsibility would pass through the King and the Prince of Wales. William understood exactly what that meant. The future king would now stand inside a clearer succession-based chain of command, while she would no longer be able to issue or approve guard-related ceremonial directives. For Camilla, the loss was more than procedural. She had believed the responsibility reflected Charles's personal trust in her place beside him. Camilla placed the document carefully on the table and looked directly at the king. She expected reassurance. She expected resistance. She expected something. Charles gave her silence instead. That silence changed the atmosphere because it suggested the sovereign was not discovering the decision with her. He already understood it. The humiliation on her face deepened as she realized that a power she had considered secure had been discussed somewhere beyond her reach. William kept his expression steady, but the tension did not leave him. The prince knew supporting the council placed him directly opposite his father's wife, at a moment when family loyalty and institutional duty were colliding. Then Camilla noticed something buried beside the formal schedule. A handwritten notation showed that a confidential briefing connected to the decision had taken place 48 hours earlier, and William had attended it. The discovery landed harder than the revocation itself. The motion had been prepared days before that morning, reviewed privately, and placed before Charles before she had ever been told it existed. Camilla had lost the command in a matter of minutes, but discovering who had known before her would turn shock into something far more dangerous. The official decision was devastating, but the deeper wound was sitting only a few feet away from Camilla. Charles had known. William had known. And suddenly the Queen was forced to measure two relationships she had spent years believing were secure. One was her marriage. The other was her place inside the future monarchy. As the meeting dissolved into silence, Charles faced an impossible reality. Defending his wife could now mean confronting his own heir. Camilla waited until the room had emptied before turning to King Charles. The sovereign carried a duty larger than any private marriage, because every decision attached to the crown could affect the stability of the institution itself. But that responsibility offered little comfort now. She looked at him and asked the question he had clearly feared. "How long did you know?" Charles hesitated. Only for a moment. Yet that pause told her more than any prepared explanation could. Charles admitted that he had been warned the motion was coming before the formal meeting. He insisted he believed the wording could still be softened, perhaps amended, before it reached its final form. Camilla heard something else entirely. The king had known she was walking into a room where her authority might be stripped away, and he had allowed her to enter without warning. For her, That was no longer just constitutional caution. It felt like abandonment from the one person whose protection she had trusted most. William carried a different burden. As Prince of Wales, the title held by the monarch's heir and the person expected to assume greater royal responsibility before becoming king. His role increasingly placed him inside ceremonial military decisions. That meant the conflict could not be reduced to a wounded stepmother and a resistant son. The future king believed the monarchy needed one unmistakable chain of authority. Charles, however, could see the human cost unfolding directly in front of him. William later spoke to his father with deliberate calm. He warned that fighting the council now could create a far larger crisis by suggesting that personal loyalty mattered more than institutional clarity. Charles reacted sharply. He accused the prince of speaking as though Camilla's humiliation were simply another administrative problem to solve. William did not retreat. According to a documented account of their private exchange, he explained that senior officials had been concerned for months that ceremonial command responsibilities were too loosely defined and vulnerable to conflicting instructions. Camilla soon discovered something even more troubling. Someone inside the royal household had supplied the council with examples of disputed guard directions stretching back months. These were not vague concerns invented for one meeting. They formed a pattern, and inside the preparation notes, one incident appeared again and again. Charles recognized it immediately. William did too. Camilla understood from their reactions that this was the memory neither man wanted reopened. The council had presented its decision as constitutional housekeeping, but buried beneath that language was one precise moment that had changed everything. Every royal rupture has a moment that looks small, until history turns around and points directly at it. For Camilla, that moment came during a guard ceremony months earlier, when a last-minute instruction collided with an order already approved through the king's household. No scandal erupted publicly that day. No confrontation reached the cameras. But inside palace walls, two contradictory commands landed within minutes of each other, and one senior officer refused to choose between them. Camilla had believed her ceremonial authority was clear. The role had grown through royal custom and delegated responsibility, meaning duties passed to her by the sovereign rather than unlimited military power held in her own right. That distinction had rarely caused trouble before. But palace officials had started worrying that separate instructions from different royal offices could create confusion over who possessed the final word, especially when ceremonial orders involved the king, the queen consort, and the heir at the same time. The trouble exploded at Windsor. Shortly before a major guard ceremony, Camilla requested a change to the ceremonial formation, believing she was acting within responsibilities Charles had already entrusted to her. William's office, however, had already transmitted an approved arrangement under the king's authority. The prince believed the matter was settled. Within minutes, both instructions reached the guards. Neither could be followed without effectively overruling the other. A senior guards officer carried the conflict directly to King Charles. He placed both instructions before the monarch and asked which one should take precedence. Charles read them, looked up, and understood instantly how dangerous the confusion had become. "There cannot be two commands," he said quietly. The king's decision was immediate. The previously approved formation would stand. Camilla's requested alteration was withdrawn. Camilla felt the humiliation sharply. She later confronted Charles in private, insisting she had done nothing reckless and had only exercised a responsibility she believed he had personally given her. The queen could accept correction, but she could not accept being treated as though she had crossed a boundary nobody had clearly defined. Charles tried to explain that the problem was not simply what she had requested. It was that two different royal offices had believed they possessed authority at the same moment. William made the same argument, but his words only deepened her suspicion. According to a documented account of their private exchange, the future king insisted the problem was structural, not personal. Camilla heard something colder. To her, structural sounded like the perfect language for removing her influence without openly saying she had become the problem. Princess Anne then entered the story through a private, documented account of her conversation with senior advisors. After learning about the conflicting instructions, she urged them to clarify ceremonial military authority before another contradiction reached the guards. Anne believed uncertainty itself was dangerous. What began as a request for clarification soon became something far more severe. The confidential review did not recommend tighter coordination. It recommended complete revocation of Camilla's command role. And when the Queen learned Anne had helped push the issue forward, her anger stopped pointing only at William. The Queen now knew where the process had begun, but knowing the origin only sharpened the question she could no longer avoid. Who had decided she could no longer be trusted with the role? Camilla did not summon William through secretaries. She asked him to meet her directly. No press office, no ceremonial smiles, no room full of courtiers capable of softening the language between them. When the prince arrived, the Queen was already waiting, and the question came almost immediately. Had he helped remove her? William knew there was no answer that would leave the relationship untouched. So instead of denying his involvement, he told her exactly why he had supported the change. Camilla entered that conversation carrying more than anger. She believed the Windsor incident had given William the opening he needed to reduce her standing. The prince had been involved in discussions about clarifying royal guard authority because his future position made the chain of command directly relevant to him. That chain of command, the clear order showing who has final authority and who must follow it, mattered because ceremonial military instructions could not safely come from competing royal offices. William believed one conflict had already proved that. Camilla did not soften the accusation. She asked him whether he had voted against her authority. William paused, held her gaze, and answered plainly he had supported the council's recommendation. The Queen immediately accused him of waiting for her to make one mistake and then using procedure to achieve what open confrontation never could. Beneath the fury sat something more painful. She feared that no matter how many years she served beside Charles, the future monarchy would always see her as temporary. William rejected that charge. He told Camilla the guards could not receive contradictory instructions simply because members of the family wanted to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. The prince insisted the issue was authority, not affection. Then he disclosed something through a documented account of that private exchange that changed the tone completely. He had personally argued that Camilla's command should return directly to the sovereign, rather than simply pass into his own hands. If this had been a grab for personal power, he told her, he would have demanded the authority himself. Camilla went quiet when William revealed more. Charles had approached him privately before the final decision and asked whether some limited part of her command could be preserved. The king had tried to find a compromise. William refused, arguing that partial authority would leave the exact uncertainty that had caused the Windsor crisis. Suddenly, her anger shifted. Charles had not simply abandoned her. He had fought to preserve something. But in the end, he had still accepted the outcome. William moved toward the end of the conversation with one final warning. The council vote, he said, had been far stronger than Camilla understood. The motion had support from someone she had never expected to stand against her. That detail stopped her cold. William had admitted his role, but the deepest blow was still hidden inside the vote itself. And when Camilla learned whose support made it decisive, the family dispute became an institutional reckoning. Royal titles can command attention. They cannot always command institutions. That distinction became painfully clear when Camilla demanded to understand how the Privy Council had reached a decision powerful enough to survive even Charles's objections. The answer exposed something larger than a family quarrel. The council had not acted because one person opposed the Queen. It acted because several senior voices had reached the same conclusion independently, and one of those voices belonged to Princess Anne. Charles sat alone with the final council memorandum and read Anne's supporting statement twice. The memorandum, the formal written record explaining the reasoning and terms behind a major decision, gave him no easy route backward. The Privy Council had acted to formalize a clearer structure around sovereign authority, constitutional continuity, and ceremonial responsibility. That mattered because once such a restructuring had been formally adopted, reversing it for personal reasons could make the monarchy appear to value family loyalty over institutional clarity. The king remained sovereign, but even he understood the danger of that impression. Charles closed the folder and rested his hand over it. He felt the weight of the vote more personally than he wanted to admit. William's support had already hurt, because it placed the heir against Camilla's position. Anne's support cut differently. She had spent a lifetime defending duty, discipline, and the crown's internal order, and her agreement with the proposal meant the issue could no longer be dismissed as a conflict driven by one ambitious future king. The monarch understood why advisors believed reform had become unavoidable. That understanding did not make the sense of betrayal disappear. Princess Anne met her brother without retreat. According to a documented account of their private conversation, she told Charles that protecting Camilla from embarrassment could not justify leaving royal authority unclear. The Princess Royal, the traditional title granted to the monarch's eldest daughter, had no interest in humiliating the Queen, but she believed the Windsor conflict had exposed a weakness that could repeat itself. Charles challenged her sharply, asking whether stripping away the entire command had truly been necessary. Anne answered that half measures would only delay the next crisis. Camilla learned the full scale of the decision soon afterward. Anne's support had transformed the proposal into something broader than William's influence. Then came the clause that made the Queen understand just how historic her loss really was. The final order did not simply revoke her authority. It created a permanent succession-linked framework designed to prevent any future consort from holding comparable independent command over the guards. Camilla had believed she was losing one role. She now realized the institution was closing the door behind her forever. And by the next morning, the first ceremonial guard instruction under that new system had already been issued. Until that moment, revocation had been words on paper. By morning, those words would become a reality. Camilla could neither ignore nor reverse. The cruelest part of losing power is not always the announcement. Sometimes it is the first ordinary moment, when the world simply moves on without you. For Camilla, that moment arrived the following morning. A ceremonial guard schedule that once would have crossed her desk was delivered directly through the new chain of authority. Nothing dramatic was said. Nobody needed to explain what it meant. The absence itself became the message. Camilla noticed it almost immediately when an aide entered with the morning files. The usual guard briefing was missing. Under the revised procedure, ceremonial military matters now moved through Charles's official authority and William's designated responsibilities, creating one clear route for decisions that had previously crossed several royal offices. That mattered because palace staff had been instructed to remove ambiguity at once. Old habits surrounding the Queen's involvement were not being slowly reduced. They were ending immediately. Camilla asked where the briefing had gone. The aide hesitated before quietly explaining that it had already been sent to the king's office. She thanked the staff member and dismissed them with controlled politeness. Only when the door closed did the Queen allow the humiliation to become something more painful. The decision had felt cold inside the council chamber. This felt personal. For years, those papers had arrived as part of the rhythm of her position. Now the palace machinery had simply learned to move without her. Charles found her later and tried to reassure her. The king told his wife that her place beside him had not changed. that one removed responsibility could not erase everything they had built together. Camilla listened, then answered with a truth he could not easily dismiss. Something had changed because everyone inside the household now knew exactly where her authority ended. The monarch could offer affection, but he could not pretend the boundaries were invisible anymore. The loss became even more concrete when Camilla learned that her former guard-related office liaison would be reassigned. The liaison, the staff member responsible for carrying information between her office and ceremonial military officials, no longer had a purpose under the new structure. That reassignment proved the council had not delivered symbolic punishment. It had dismantled the working system around her role. Camilla reacted by withdrawing from an upcoming ceremonial briefing she was still entitled to attend. According to a documented palace account, she feared her presence would be interpreted as an attempt to reclaim influence that had already been removed. Charles discovered the decision and immediately understood what was happening. She was no longer fighting the ruling. She was disappearing from spaces where she still belonged. That frightened him more than her anger had. Charles decided the next conversation could not be between a sovereign defending an institution and a queen defending her position. It had to be between a husband and wife, confronting what that institution had done to them. The institution had finished restructuring the command, but inside the royal marriage, the most important conversation had not yet begun. There were no counselors when Charles finally approached Camilla. No uniforms, no advisors, no carefully prepared language. He closed the door behind him and faced the woman who believed he had allowed an institution to strip away something he once gave her. For the first time since the decision, neither of them could hide behind procedure. Camilla wanted one answer. Did Charles believe the council was right? His response would decide whether this became merely a lost command or a lasting wound between them. Camilla no longer wanted explanations about votes, advisors, or constitutional caution. Her anger toward William and Anne had cooled into something harder, disappointment in the king. Charles understood that defending the mechanics of the decision would only deepen the distance between them. The Privy Council had already spoken, and its ruling was settled. What she needed now was not the voice of the sovereign. She needed the truth from her husband. Camilla asked him directly whether he believed she should still possess the authority. Charles did not answer quickly. Then he gave her the response she had feared. After the Windsor conflict, he believed the command structure needed to change. The king did not say she had acted with bad intent. He did not accuse her of abusing power. But he admitted that two competing channels of authority could not continue. That mattered, because ceremonial military responsibility depended on certainty, and one confused order could weaken confidence far beyond a single palace event. Camilla absorbed the admission in silence, before telling Charles what had truly wounded her. Losing the guards hurt, she said, but discovering that he had privately doubted the arrangement and never warned her hurt more. The Queen could accept that an institution might change its rules. What she struggled to accept was that the man beside her had known a storm was coming and allowed her to walk into it blind. Charles did not defend himself. He accepted the accusation. Charles then explained, through a documented account of their private conversation, that he had tried to preserve a smaller ceremonial role for her before the final decision. He feared complete revocation would be interpreted as a personal rejection rather than a structural correction. Camilla finally understood that he had tried to protect her position, but he had tried too late, and in silence. Camilla drew the line herself. There were two wounds now: the loss of institutional power and the damage inside their marriage. She told the king she could survive the first if they repaired the second. Then came the decision neither William nor Anne had been certain she would make. Camilla would not challenge the council. She would not demand restoration. She would publicly respect the new framework and allow the command to pass without resistance. Charles understood what that choice cost her. Camilla had stopped resisting the decision in private. Now she would have to stand before the country while everyone watched what she did next. By the time the first major ceremony arrived under the new command structure, the palace could no longer contain the story. Newspapers had turned the council decision into a battle over tradition, marriage, succession, and power. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, knowing one detail mattered more than any headline. Would Camilla attend? When the royal car finally appeared and she stepped into the ceremony beside Charles rather than withdrawing from it, the public received an answer nobody inside the palace could manufacture. Camilla knew the country was no longer watching only a royal ceremony. The event had become a test of whether she would accept the new order or resist it in public. Palace officials had carefully described the restructuring as a clarification of authority, rather than a punishment, because the difference mattered. One version suggested modernization, the other suggested humiliation. The Queen understood both interpretations were already fighting for control of the story. A morning newspaper made that battle impossible to ignore. Its front page carried the words, "The command ends," in enormous type, while crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace hours before the ceremony. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's principal working residence in London and one of the most public symbols of the crown, had become the stage for a verdict no formal statement could settle. People wanted to see Camilla herself. Would she stay away? Would she look defeated? Or would she walk into the moment that had been built around her loss? Camilla arrived beside King Charles and briefly hesitated before continuing. The monarch leaned toward her and quietly said something that was not captured publicly. She answered with a small nod. Then she moved forward. That simple decision carried enormous weight, because withdrawing would have allowed an institutional dispute to look like an open fracture inside the royal family. Charles understood it. So did William, watching nearby. William remained controlled as Camilla took her place. The prince knew his support for the restructuring had helped create this moment. Yet her attendance prevented the conflict from becoming a public war between the present queen and the future king. Princess Anne understood the cost as well. When Anne and Camilla finally came face to face, neither woman argued. The Princess Royal offered a restrained acknowledgement, and the Queen returned it. No apology was given. None was demanded. Camilla then made the clearest statement possible, without saying a word. She did not move toward the position associated with her former command responsibility. She made no attempt to reclaim ceremonial influence. The guards proceeded under the revised structure without competing orders, confusion, or visible confrontation. The system had worked. But so had her restraint. The public spectacle ended without collapse, yet the emotional verdict still remained. The guards marched under a new command. The palace survived the confrontation, and only one verdict remained: whether this humiliation had diminished Camilla or finally defined her place. Camilla entered this crisis believing the loss of command threatened everything she had fought to build inside the monarchy. By its end, something unexpected had happened. The authority was gone. The council would not reverse itself. William would inherit greater responsibility. Anne would stand by the position she had taken, and Charles could not erase what had happened. Yet the family had not broken. Camilla's final choice transformed the meaning of the entire confrontation. She stopped measuring her place by the power she could keep. Camilla returned from the ceremony beside King Charles, carrying none of the anger that had consumed the first days of the crisis. The Privy Council restructuring remained firmly in place, meaning the formal system governing ceremonial authority would not be reopened simply to ease personal pain. Her former command over the royal guards was gone. Future responsibility would follow the new succession-based framework, keeping the sovereign at the center while giving William clearer duties as heir. That mattered because the monarchy had finally removed the uncertainty that created the Windsor conflict in the first place. Camilla later took the council decision from a drawer and looked at it one final time. Instead of keeping it close as a reminder of what had been taken from her, she handed it to an aide for permanent filing. Then she turned to Charles and told him she would not ask him to reopen the ruling. The king understood the significance immediately. She was not pretending the decision had stopped hurting. She was choosing to stop allowing that pain to control their marriage. William approached Camilla privately afterward. According to a documented account of their conversation, the prince acknowledged that the process had caused her genuine pain, even though he still believed the outcome was necessary. The queen accepted his position without pretending their confrontation had never happened. He had defended institutional clarity at personal cost. She had endured that decision without turning the disagreement into permanent family warfare. Neither forgot what had happened, but both stopped fighting the same battle. Princess Anne offered no apology for supporting the reform, and Camilla demanded none. The Princess Royal remained convinced that authority had needed clearer limits. The Queen now accepted that conclusion, even if she still carried the sting of how it had been reached. Their restrained reconciliation became proof that disagreement inside the royal family did not have to become destruction. Charles learned the hardest lesson of all. Trying to protect his wife through silence had wounded her more deeply than the uncomfortable truth would have. Camilla lost a historic command, but she did not lose her marriage, her public place beside the king, or her ability to endure. William emerged with greater responsibility, while the monarchy emerged with a cleaner boundary between family status and constitutional duty. The crisis ended not with restoration, but acceptance. The council took away Camilla's command, but the final verdict belonged to her. Faced with the choice between preserving personal power and preserving the stability of the crown, the queen let the power go, and in doing so, closed one of the most painful chapters of Charles's reign. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.